Imagine, like working 60 hours a week. You spend all your evenings curating your house until it looks like some kind of modern art museum.
Oh, totally.
You micromanage your diet. You carefully rehearse every single thing you say in meetings, so you always sound like the smartest person in the room. You are doing absolutely everything perfectly.
Right, checking all the boxes.
Exactly. And yet you are completely exhausted. You're deeply lonely, and you're terrified that someone is, going to find out you're actually a fraud.
That imposter syndrome just creeping in.
Yeah. You are doing all the things society tells you will earn you love and belonging, only to realize that those exact behaviors are the very things keeping you isolated. So, welcome to the Book Nook.
So glad to be here.
This is our corner of the world, a community completely dedicated to exploring the most impactful, transformative books in self-help, psychology, spirituality, and personal growth.
It really is the best space.
It is. And today, we are going on a deep dive into a text that, honestly, it forces us to look in the mirror and ask why we are running ourselves into the ground.
It is such a vital conversation to have right now. I mean, the material we are exploring today is from the seminal 2010 book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are by Dr. Brené Brown.
Such a classic.
It really is. She is a researcher and a professor, but beyond her academic credentials, she possesses this rare ability to translate like raw sociological data into profound human truths.
And the mission of this deep dive is to completely dismantle that illusion of perfection we just talked about. We want to uncover the daily practices required for what Dr. Brown calls a wholehearted life.
Yeah, wholehearted with a capital W.
Right. But the origin story of how this book came to be is honestly, arguably the best part. Because it wasn't born out of some peaceful meditation retreat.
Oh, not at all.
It came from a total messy breakdown.
The irony of Dr. Brown's journey is truly something to behold. I mean, at the time she began the research that would eventually become this book, she had already spent a decade studying really difficult, dark emotions.
Like shame, right?
Specifically, shame, fear, and vulnerability, yeah. She was a dedicated academic, a social worker by training, and she had fully bought into the idea that she was, living right.
Doing everything by the book.
Exactly. She was working incredibly hard, following all the societal rules, raising her kids exactly by the pediatric guidelines. She was attempting to basically outsmart vulnerability through sheer effort and intellectual understanding.
She basically thought her PhD was a shield. She thought she could outrun the exact thing she was dedicating her entire life to studying.
Precisely. The academic mindset often operates on this assumption that if you can measure something, categorize it and understand its mechanisms, you are no longer subject to its effects.
Like you're immune to it.
Right. But in November 2006, she was sitting at her breakfast table, analyzing data from thousands of interviews.
Just a normal Tuesday morning for a researcher.
Just drowning in data, yeah. She had collected these deeply personal stories from men and women across the country, ranging from 18 all the way up to 87 years old.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It's massive. And as a grounded theory researcher, her job was to let the data speak for itself, to seek out patterns without having a preconceived hypothesis.
To see what bubbles up.
Exactly. And as she coded this massive pile of qualitative data, she started noticing a really distinct pattern among a specific subset of people who are living remarkably inspiring, resilient lives.
People who just handle things differently.
Yeah, they navigated adversity differently. They talked about love and belonging in a way she had never encountered in all her years of shame research. So she grabbed a manila folder, took a Sharpie, and wrote the very first word that popped into her head on the tab.
Which was wholehearted.
Wholehearted. And because she's a researcher, she immediately tries to systematize this.
Yeah.
Right? She literally gets out giant poster paper and creates 2 lists to figure out what makes these wholehearted people tick.
Yes, she engaged in a classic comparative analysis. She created a do list and a don't list.
So simple, but so revealing. It really is. She mapped out what these resilient, wholehearted people actively cultivated in their daily routines, and then she contrasted it with what they actively avoided.
What kind of things were on the do list?
The do column began filling up with words like courage, compassion, connection, rest, play, authenticity, and gratitude.
Sounds like a great list.
It does. But
Yeah.
then the don't list, the behaviors these people purposefully steered clear of, was populated with words like perfection, numbing, certainty, exhaustion, self-sufficiency, fitting in, and judgment.
So she finishes these 2 lists. She steps back from the poster paper in her breakfast room to admire her work. And instead of feeling accomplished, she has an absolute crisis.
She described it as the worst kind of sticker shock.
Oh, no.
Looking at those 2 lists, the reality just crashed down on her. She was living squarely on the don't list.
Wow. Every single thing she was doing.
Every single thing she valued and relied upon to feel safe. Her perfectionism, using exhaustion as a status symbol to prove her worth, her desperate need for certainty in her research, her constant attempts to fit in. They were the exact behaviors that the wholehearted people in her study recognized as toxic and actively avoided.
That is just devastating.
She was so confronted by it, so deeply unsettled by this realization, that she literally folded up the poster paper, crammed it into a plastic Rubbermaid tub, and shoved it under her bed.
Right next to the Christmas wrapping paper.
Yes, right next to the holiday wrap.
The imagery of that is just too good. Shoving the terrifying truth under the bed, hoping if you don't look at it, it'll just stop being true.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. It's kind of like world-class cardiologists looking at an X-ray, pointing out the severe arterial blockages to a room full of medical students, explaining exactly how this patient's lifestyle is killing them, and then suddenly looking at the name in the corner and realizing they're looking at their own chart.
That is a perfect analogy.
It's this profound, terrifying moment of, oh wait, this isn't just data, this is my life. But it makes me wonder, why is it that the people who study these concepts, like the psychologists, the social workers, the sociologists, are so often the most resistant to applying the medicine to their own lives?
Honestly, it comes down to the protective armor of intellect. When you study a topic academically, you can easily trick your brain into believing that cognitive mastery equals emotional immunity.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It really is. You think, well, I have mapped the territory, I have drawn the cartography of shame, therefore I cannot possibly get lost in these woods.
Because you hold the map.
Right. But what Dr. Brown experienced, and what she later humorously but seriously termed her 2007 breakdown spiritual awakening, was the visceral realization that knowledge is completely insufficient without practice.
You actually have to do the thing.
You cannot think your way into wholeheartedness. The intellectual brain wants to stand on the shore and analyze the water, but wholeheartedness requires you to actually get in the water, which is terrifying and cold and unpredictable.
So she couldn't just read another book about it.
No, she realized she couldn't intellectualize her way out of this, so she actually had to hire a therapist named Diana.
Good for her.
And she walked into Diana's office, handed her these lists, and essentially said, "I'm living on the wrong list. Fix me."
But Diana doesn't just hand her a prescription for a quick fix, right? Because what Brown was going through wasn't a problem to be solved over a long weekend.
Not at all.
The book frames this period not as a breakdown, really, but as the audacity of authenticity. She realized she was hitting midlife, but she refuses to use the term midlife crisis. She calls it an unraveling.
Yes, and the distinction between a crisis and an unraveling is critical.
How so?
Well, a crisis implies a sudden temporary emergency, like a sudden fire that you can extinguish so you can go right back to normal.
Right, put it out and move on.
Exactly. An unraveling, however, is a structural failure of the facade you've built. It is a time when the universe is essentially challenging you to let go of who you are supposed to be and to embrace who you actually are.
That sounds intense.
It is the slow, deliberate, and often very painful untangling of all the intricate knots you tied yourself into just to appease the outside world, your parents, your boss, or your spouse.
What does that actually feel like, though? Because unraveling sounds almost gentle, like pulling a loose thread on a sweater. But I imagine psychologically it feels like dying.
Oh, it absolutely feels like a death, because it is the death of the ego's primary defense mechanism.
Wow.
It feels like a desperate, undeniable pull to live a life of your own choosing, regardless of the expectations you're shattering. And while midlife is an incredibly common trigger for this, because you finally realize you have fewer days ahead of you than behind you, an unraveling can be triggered by anything.
Like a major life event.
Yeah, it can be triggered by a divorce, becoming a parent, experiencing a sudden loss, or honestly just sitting in traffic on the way to a soul-sucking job and realizing, I cannot do this for another 30 years.
I think we all had that moment in traffic.
For sure. The universe is incredibly generous with these wake-up calls. We are just culturally conditioned to be incredibly quick at hitting the snooze button.
We just keep hitting snooze with distractions and busy work until the alarm is so deafening we literally can't function anymore.
Exactly.
So she finally stops hitting snooze. She leans into this unraveling with her therapist, and out of this intense, muddy soul work comes the definition of wholehearted living.
How does she actually define that? Like, if that's the goal, what is it?
The definition she arrived at really serves as the thesis for the entire text. Wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness.
Worthiness.
Yes, it means
Mm.
cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and consciously think, no matter what gets done today and how much is left undone, I am enough.
That is powerful.
And crucially, it's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the absolute truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. I am enough. It's such a beautiful phrase. I mean, it belongs on a bumper sticker.
It really does.
But let's be real. When you actually try to apply that to a Tuesday, where you completely dropped the ball on a major project at work, you snapped at your partner because you were stressed out, and you forgot to call your mom back for the third day in a row.
We've all been there.
Right. Standing in front of the mirror on that day and saying, I am enough, feels like a delusion. It feels like you're just straight up lying to yourself.
And that friction you're describing is exactly why it is the work of a lifetime, not a one-time revelation. To actually bridge the gap between knowing you should feel enough and actually feeling it, she outlines 3 daily practices.
The toolkit.
Exactly. She calls them the gifts of imperfection: courage, compassion, and connection. Now, what's essential to understand is how she strips these words of their mythological superhero connotations.
Right, because when I hear courage, I immediately picture a firefighter running into a burning building or someone standing up to a dictator.
That's the Hollywood version.
Yeah. But she talks about ordinary courage. What is that?
Well, she traces the etymology. The root of the word courage is cor, the Latin word for heart. In its earliest forms, the word courage meant speaking one's mind by telling all one's heart.
Telling all one's heart. I love that.
Over centuries, the definition morphed into a synonym for heroic, life-threatening acts. But her research reclaims that original meaning. Ordinary courage is the daily, gritty habit of telling the story of who you are with your whole heart.
So it's about vulnerability.
It is the bravery required to be vulnerable. It takes ordinary courage to look at your partner and say, I am really struggling right now. Or to sit in a meeting and say, I actually don't know the answer to that.
Which is terrifying in a corporate setting.
Extremely terrifying. Or to ask for help without letting the need for help diminish your internal sense of self-worth.
So courage is the honesty. But then she moves to compassion. And hold on, I have to stop you here and push back on this one.
Go for it.
Because everything in my upbringing, everything in our culture, says that compassion means infinite patience. It means giving the shirt off your back.
Right.
But she argues that true compassion actually requires boundary setting. She says you cannot be compassionate if you are resentful, and therefore, you must learn to say no.
Yes.
That sounds incredibly selfish to me. Like if my friend is going through a terrible crisis and needs me to come over at 2 a.m., how is telling them no? Need to sleep, an act of compassion.
It is deeply counterintuitive, which is why it's one of the most transformative concepts in the book.
Right.
Let's look at the psychological mechanism of resentment.
Yeah, let's break it down.
If your friend calls at 2 a.m. and you are entirely repleted, but you say yes because you think that's what a quote-unquote good person does, you are dragging an exhausted, bitter version of yourself to their house.
True.
You sit there listening to them, but internally your brain is keeping score. You are thinking, I have a massive presentation tomorrow. Why are they doing this to me? They are so needy.
Ouch. Yeah, I've been there.
You are physically present, but emotionally you are judging them.
You're silently punishing them for crossing a boundary that you never actually set.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are holding them accountable for a line they didn't even know existed. Dr. Brown's research revealed that the most compassionate people, the people who truly empathize with the suffering of others, are actually the most boundaried people.
That is so wild to think about.
Compassion stems from recognizing our shared humanity, acknowledging that we are all made of strength and struggle. But you can only honor someone else's struggle if you are vigorously protecting your own emotional energy.
Because otherwise you just burn out.
If you are chronically overextended, your empathy degrades into apathy or resentment. You have to say no to the things that drain you so that when you finally do say yes, it is genuine, wholehearted, and free of a secret invoice.
Free of a secret invoice. I need to write that down. That completely flips the script. It means boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They are the parameters that allow you to actually let people in safely.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Okay, let's look at the third tool, connection. She defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment.
Yes. The giving and receiving piece is huge.
But society tells us, literally from childhood, that it is better to give than to receive. We idolize the strong, stoic, independent person who never needs a favor. But Brown argues that if we attach judgment to receiving help, we are secretly attaching judgment to giving help. How does that work? If I love helping people, how am I judging them?
This is a devastating realization for anyone who prides themselves on being the fixer or the rock of their family.
A lot of our listeners are probably nodding right now.
For sure. If you derive your entire sense of self-worth from being the helper, the person who always has a solution, who bails everyone out, who never needs a shoulder to cry on, you are actually creating a profound power imbalance in your relationships.
Wait, really?
Think about the cognitive mechanism here. If you refuse to let others help you because you subconsciously believe that needing help is a sign of weakness or failure, then by definition, when you help your friends, you are viewing them as weak or failing.
Oh, wow.
It's hard to hear, isn't it?
Even if I don't say it out loud, the underlying math of my worldview basically dictates that I am in the superior strong position and they are in the inferior weak position.
Precisely. You are giving from a pedestal.
Oof.
True connection is a horizontal dynamic. It is a two-way street of vulnerability. It requires the courage to say, I am falling apart today, I have nothing left in the tank, and I need you to hold me up.
Which goes back to the ordinary courage we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Until we can receive help with a completely open heart, unclouded by shame, we are never truly giving with an open heart. We are just using giving as a tool to manage our own anxiety and maintain control.
Which means if you refuse to be vulnerable with your friends, you are actually depriving them of the opportunity to be your rock, which weakens the connection for both of you. You're starving the relationship of mutual trust.
Which brings us to the core biological imperative driving all of this. Brown asserts, based on overwhelming sociological data, that love and belonging are irreducible innate human needs.
Like food and water.
Literally. We are physically, cognitively, and spiritually wired to belong. It is as crucial to our survival as eating. When these needs aren't met, we don't just feel a little sad. Our nervous systems perceive it as a physical threat. We break. We fracture.
And this leads into what I think is one of the most stop-you-in-your-tracks insights in the entire text. It's the distinction she makes between fitting in and belonging. I think colloquially we use those terms as synonyms. We say, oh, I just want to fit in here. But she argues they are actually diametric opposites.
The distinction is vital because mistaking one for the other is a major source of our exhaustion. Fitting in is an external assessment. It is walking into a room, scanning the environment, figuring out what the group values, and then morphing yourself to become that thing.
It's like being a chameleon.
It is acting. It is a betrayal of the authentic self for the sake of temporary safety. Belonging, on the other hand, is an internal state. It requires presenting your true, imperfect, authentic self to the world.
Because if you morph yourself to fit the group isn't actually accepting you. They're accepting the avatar you created.
Exactly. Let's look at the cognitive dissonance there. If you wear a mask and people love the mask, you never actually feel loved.
That makes so much sense.
In fact, their love might even increase your anxiety because now you live in constant fear that the mask will slip and they will see the real you and reject you. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are.
It's so much easier in the short term, though, to say, I'll be whoever you need me to be as long as you don't reject me.
Oh, absolutely. It's a survival tactic.
But it's junk food for the soul. It fills you up for a second, but leaves you completely malnourished. And this ties into a really painful truth she discovered about our capacity for belonging. She writes that our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance.
Let's break down why that is structurally true. If you harbor deep self-loathing, if you fundamentally believe you are flawed and unlovable, and someone comes along and says, I see you and I love you, your brain encounters a massive contradiction.
It kind of short circuits.
Yes. You have to either believe that you are wrong about yourself, which requires dismantling your entire worldview, or you have to conclude that the other person is either lying, has terrible judgment, or is being successfully manipulated by you.
So you push them away.
The lack of self-acceptance literally blocks the incoming love. Furthermore, she found that we can only love others as much as we love ourselves.
She uses that quote from a research participant, Justin Valentin, which honestly made me put the book down and just stare at the wall.
It's a heavy one.
He was talking about parenting. And he realized that through fiercely loving his daughters unconditionally, He was forced to look in the mirror and realize he needed to love the little boy inside himself just as fiercely. Because you cannot offer unconditional love to a child if your entire internal model for yourself is rooted in harsh conditions, criticism, and shame.
We cannot give our children what we don't have. It is a devastating realization about generational trauma.
It really is.
If you demand perfection from yourself, your children will absorb the lesson that love is conditional on performance, no matter how many times you verbally tell them you love them unconditionally.
They watch what you do, not what you say.
They watch your actions. They watch how you treat yourself when you fail.
So if we know that we need to accept ourselves in order to belong, and we know that pretending to be someone else is killing us, what is standing in the way? According to the text, the biggest barrier is what she calls the 20-ton shield of perfectionism.
Perfectionism is shame's favorite tool, and we need to clarify what perfectionism is not, because culture often treats it like a humble brag.
Oh, totally. In a job interview, people say, my biggest flaw is that I'm a perfectionist, implying they just care a lot about high quality.
Right, like it's a hidden strength.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Brown draws a hard line between healthy striving and perfectionism. Healthy striving is self-focused. It asks, how can I improve? How can I grow? Perfectionism is entirely other-focused. It asks, what will they think?
It's like showing up to an intimate dinner party wearing literal 200-pound medieval plate armor. You are so terrified that someone might criticize you or judge you or see a flaw in you that you strap on this massive iron suit.
That's exactly how it feels.
And yes, maybe it protects you from the imaginary arrows of judgment. But you can't sit down, you can't eat, you can't hug anyone. You are completely immobilized by the very thing you thought would keep you safe.
That is a brilliant analogy because perfectionism is exactly that heavy, and it is that isolating. It is the core belief that if we look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, we can avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame.
But it doesn't work.
No, it is a deeply self-destructive and addictive belief system. It's self-destructive because perfection doesn't exist. It is a completely unattainable goal because it's based on trying to control how other people perceive you, which is impossible.
And why does she say it's addictive?
Well, it operates like a psychological hamster wheel. Because perfection is impossible, you will inevitably experience shame, judgment, or failure. But instead of your brain saying, oh, perfectionism is a flawed strategy, I should try something else,
It doubles down.
the perfectionist brain says, I experienced shame because I wasn't perfect enough. Next time, I must try harder. I must be more vigilant. It constantly moves the goalposts, keeping you trapped in a cycle of exhausting effort and inevitable failure.
So how do we physically take the armor off? Because if you've been wearing it your whole life, taking it off feels like you're going to be annihilated by criticism. The book brings in the research of Dr. Kristin Neff, who studies self-compassion, to combat this.
Dr. Neff's work provides the actual mechanism for dismantling perfectionism. She outlines 3 specific elements of self-compassion.
What's the first one?
The first is self-kindness. This means being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than punishing ourselves with relentless self-flagellation. It is treating yourself with the same baseline respect you would offer a stranger.
Which is incredibly hard. I say things to myself in my own head that I wouldn't say to my worst enemy.
Exactly, which is why the second element is so necessary. Common humanity. Perfectionism thrives on isolation. It tells you that you are the only one who failed, the only one who is struggling.
But that's a lie.
It is. Common humanity is the active recognition that suffering, failure, and inadequacy are an inherent part of the shared human experience. It is the conscious shift from asking, why me, to realizing, me too.
Me too. Okay, and the third.
The third element is mindfulness. This is the practice of holding our negative emotions in a balanced awareness. We neither suppress the negative emotions, nor do we over-identify with them to the point where we are swept away by a tidal wave of negativity.
Brown gives a really relatable, somewhat embarrassing example of this exact process in action. She talks about sending an email to a famous author she deeply admired, asking for permission to quote her.
Oh, this story is so good.
Right after she hits send, we have all had this exact moment. She looks at the sent folder and realizes she misspelled the author's name. It's a tiny thing, but your stomach just drops through the floor.
The worst feeling.
And her perfectionist brain immediately spiraled. Her internal monologue went straight to, I'm a sloppy hack, I have a PhD, and I can't even spell. She's going to think I'm a complete idiot. But because she had been practicing this work, she actually caught herself in the spiral.
Yes, and notice what she did. She didn't try to falsely inflate her ego and say, I'm a genius anyway. She applied self-compassion. She looked at the draft of the chapter she was working on, took a breath, and practiced mindfulness.
She talked to herself, right?
She literally spoke to herself and said, "Be kind to yourself, Brené. It's a typo. It is not a big deal. You are human."
It is a micro moment of self-compassion, but it acts like a circuit breaker. It stops the shame spiral from turning into a full-blown crisis. And it's so important because the book emphasizes that perfectionism never happens in a vacuum. It is contagious.
Very contagious.
If we are highly judgmental of our own minor mistakes, like a typo, we will inevitably project that harsh, unforgiving judgment onto our spouses, our kids, and our coworkers.
Which is why taking off the armor is an act of service to the people around you. There is another powerful anecdote in the text about practicing imperfection.
Oh, the messy house story.
Yes, she describes a weekend where her house is an absolute disaster, toys are everywhere, mail is piled up on the counters, it's total chaos. And suddenly her daughter yells that their friends, Dawn and Julie, have just pulled into the driveway unannounced.
My literal nightmare.
Right, and her daughter immediately goes into panic mode. She asks if she should frantically start throwing things into closets and cleaning up because she has been conditioned to know that her mom usually freaks out about the house looking perfect before anyone is allowed inside.
It shows how quickly children absorb the anxiety of our perfectionism. But in that crucial moment, Brown makes a very conscious, difficult choice to leave the shield on the floor. She stops her daughter.
She tells her daughter, "No, don't clean. I'm just getting dressed. I'm so glad they're here. Who cares about the house?" And she intentionally opens the front door and lets her friends into the absolute mess.
That takes guts.
It does. She chooses the vulnerability of connection over the safety of presenting a flawless image.
Think about the physical feeling of doing that. My immediate instinct would be to crack the door open 2 inches, step outside onto the porch, and close the door behind me so they couldn't see the mess.
To hide it.
But by doing that, you are sending a subconscious message to your friends. You are only allowed to interact with me when the stage is perfectly set.
Yeah.
You are not allowed to see the reality of my life. It inherently keeps them at arm's length.
And this naturally transitions into what happens when the armor fails. Because we can't maintain the perfect image forever, life is too chaotic. So when the shield cracks and we feel the unbearable sting of shame, judgment, or vulnerability, what is our cultural reflex? We numb.
Oh, the numbing. This section of the book is wildly confronting. Because when we hear the word numbing, we typically picture addiction in the clinical sense, drugs, alcohol, gambling.
The obvious ones.
But Brown's research uncovered a psychological truth about numbing that is absolutely terrifying. There's no such thing as selective emotional numbing.
This is perhaps one of the most vital structural takeaways for any listener trying to understand their own emotional landscape. We as humans possess a full, wide spectrum of emotion. If you take a metaphorical anesthetic to numb the dark, painful emotions, the shame, the fear, the intense disappointment, the grief, you cannot isolate the effect of that anesthetic.
It just bleeds into everything.
It spreads. By numbing the dark, you unintentionally, inevitably numb the light emotions. You numb joy, gratitude, sense of purpose, and love. You cannot selectively mute the bad without muting the good. You just end up flatlining your entire emotional life.
You turn everything gray. And her extrapolation of what numbing actually looks like in modern society is so broad, it basically indicts all of us. It's not just the classic addictions. It's the highly rewarded, culturally acceptable ways we run from discomfort.
Exactly. She categorizes things like chronically working a 60-hour week as a form of numbing.
Workaholism.
Why? Because if you are always exhausted by work, you never have to sit quietly and face the reality of your failing marriage or your deep sense of unfulfillment.
You're just too busy.
Right. It's incessant gossiping, which allows you to focus entirely on the flaws of others so you don't have to look at your own insecurities. It's spending 7 hours a day scrolling on social media. She even jokes about the mundane, everyday numbing like dealing with the anxiety of uncertainty by eating an apple fritter.
It's anything we use to take the edge off of vulnerability. I want you, the listener, to really think about this in the context of a normal Tuesday. Think about being in an elevator with a neighbor, and there is a slightly awkward silence. What is the very first thing you do?
Reach for the phone.
You reach into your pocket, pull out your phone, and check your email, an email you just checked 2 minutes ago. That micro distraction is a tiny hit of numbness to avoid the incredibly low-stakes vulnerability of just standing in silence with another human being.
It's so true.
We're so terrified of the quiet, messy awkwardness of being human that we keep ourselves constantly medicated with distraction.
We are over-medicated on distraction, and as a direct result, we're starving for joy. Because if you are constantly numbing the discomfort, you are blocking your capacity for true joy. This leads directly into the psychological mechanics of joy, gratitude, and creativity.
Which is where things get really surprising.
Yes. Here again, the research provides a massive twist. We all assume we want joy, we chase it. But Dr. Brown explains that for many of us, joy is actually one of the most terrifying, difficult emotions we can experience. She calls it a sharp, thorny emotion.
I remember reading that and thinking, wait, joy is terrifying. How does that make any sense?
It makes sense when you understand the vulnerability of it. When you are experiencing a moment of profound, unadulterated joy, maybe you are standing at the edge of your child's bed watching them sleep peacefully, or you are standing at the altar getting married, or you finally get the job you've worked 10 years for.
Those peak moments.
In that exact moment of peak joy, you are completely exposed. There is an immediate primal fear that this beautiful thing could be taken away from you. The joy makes you realize what you have to lose. Furthermore, she references Lynn Twist's brilliant book, The Soul of Money, which points out that we live in a culture saturated by deep scarcity.
The not enoughness.
Twist notes that our very first thought upon waking is often, I didn't get enough sleep, and our second thought is, I don't have enough time. We operate on a baseline frequency of not enough.
So when we actually experience the fullness of joy, our scarcity-wired brain panics. It thinks, this is too good, this can't last, danger is coming. And so, to protect ourselves, we try to beat vulnerability to the punch by imagining the worst-case scenario. We call it waiting for the other shoe to drop.
We dress rehearse tragedy.
I do this constantly. You're having the perfect family vacation, everyone is laughing, the weather's beautiful, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you picture the plane crashing on the flight home.
Just intrusive thoughts.
Or you get promoted, and you immediately start worrying about being fired for incompetence. We literally invite catastrophic thoughts into our best moments, thinking that if we rehearse the tragedy, we won't be blindsided when it actually happens. We think we can outsmart the pain of loss.
But the psychological reality is that dress rehearsing tragedy does absolutely nothing to protect you from the pain of actual loss. If the plane crashes, having worried about it on the beach doesn't make it hurt less.
It just ruins the beach.
All you have successfully done is rob yourself of the joy you are experiencing in the present moment. You invited the darkness in early. The darkness does not destroy the light, it defines it.
Well,
It is our fear of the darkness that casts our joy into the shadows. And the research points to only one effective antidote to this scarcity-induced fear of joy.
which is?
The only way to actually hold on to joy is through the active practice of gratitude.
Gratitude as an action, a tangible practice, not just an attitude you vaguely hold. That is huge. And drawing from her interviews with trauma survivors, people who had actually experienced the worst-case scenarios, who had lost children, spouses, homes, the text reveals something so deeply poignant about what joy actually is.
Yes. We are culturally conditioned to believe that true joy is found in extraordinary, fame-driven, cinematic moments, the massive vacation, the lottery win, the huge promotion. But the trauma survivors revealed the exact opposite.
What did they say?
They said that what they missed the most, the memories that held the deepest joy, were the completely mundane, ordinary things.
The sensory details of the ordinary. They missed the smell of coffee brewing in the morning while their spouse read the paper. They missed the annoying sound of the screen door slamming when their kid ran outside. They missed the physical act of tying small shoes.
The tiny moments.
We dismiss these ordinary moments because we equate ordinary with meaningless. But the wholehearted people recognize that the ordinary moments are not the filler between the big events. They are the actual substance where life resides.
And fully engaging with those ordinary moments, finding the meaning in them, requires us to tap into our creativity, which is another major pillar of wholehearted living. The book mandates the cultivation of creativity and the letting go of comparison.
I love this part because I am absolutely one of those people who used to wave my hand and say, oh, I'm just an analytical person. I'm not a creative person. I can't even draw a stick figure. I used it as a total cop-out. But she destroys that excuse completely.
She doesn't let anyone get away with that.
She says there is no such thing biologically as a non-creative person. There are only people who use their innate creativity and people who suppress it.
We are fundamentally born makers. Human beings have a biological imperative to create meaning, and we do that through making things. And she defines creativity incredibly broadly. It is not just painting on a canvas.
Right.
It is coding an elegant website. It is rebuilding a vintage car engine. It is cultivating a garden. It is cooking a complex meal for your family. The medium doesn't matter. But the consequence of not using that creative impulse is severe. Unused creativity doesn't just evaporate harmlessly into the ether, it metastasizes. It turns into resentment, grief, judgment, and a pervasive sense of emptiness.
But the gremlin that constantly kills our creativity before it even starts is comparison. The moment we look at someone else's path or someone else's garden or someone else's code and try to measure our worth against theirs, we lose our originality. Comparison is the absolute thief of happiness.
It is, and it ties directly into another crucial element she discusses. Cultivating meaningful work and letting go of self-doubt, and this post is
We put so much pressure on ourselves there.
immense, crushing pressure to define our entire worth and identity by our singular job title. If our job isn't our ultimate passion, we feel like we are failing at life. To combat this, she references author Marcy Albaher's concept of the /career.
The /career is such a liberating concept. It's a way to reclaim your multifaceted identity in a world that desperately wants to put you in one single box. Dr. Brown shares a story from a conference that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, the jewelry maker.
Yeah. She met a woman wearing these incredibly beautiful, intricate earrings. When Brown complimented them and asked how long she'd been a jeweler, the woman immediately blushed, looked down, and said, "Oh no. I'm a CPA. I'm not a real jeweler. I just do this on the side. I don't make much money doing it."
It's a heartbreaking interaction. She's standing there literally wearing the physical manifestation of her art, and she is denying her identity as an artist simply because it doesn't generate sufficient capitalist value.
Just because it doesn't pay the bills.
We are so deeply conditioned to believe that if a passion doesn't pay the mortgage, it isn't legitimate. We strip the meaning from our own lives because it doesn't fit a corporate structure.
We think we have to monetize our joy for it to count. But cultivating meaningful work doesn't necessarily mean you have to dramatically quit your day job and live in a van. It means owning all the slashes of who you actually are.
Exactly.
You can be a CPA/jeweler. You can be a mother/poet. You can be a software developer/amateur baker. Meaning is unique to you, and it doesn't require a W-2 to be valid.
Now, to take all of these concepts, the courage, the boundaries, the dropping of the shield, the creativity, and actually operationalize them in moments of high stress, Brown offers a very specific practical framework called Dig Deep.
Indeed.
Yes, Dig G is an acronym that stands for Get Deliberate, Get Inspired, and Get Going.
Let's really drill down into how this actually works in the real world. Let's say you get an email from your boss that is mildly critical of a project you just submitted.
A classic trigger.
Your nervous system spikes, the 20-ton shield of perfectionism flies up, and you are immediately thrown into a shame spiral. You want to numb out, snap at your spouse, or quit your job.
Yeah.
How do you execute Dig Deep in that exact moment?
This is where the rubber meets the road. In that moment of the shame spiral, the first step is to get deliberate. This means you do not react immediately.
You pause.
You pause, and you deliberately set an intention about how you want to handle this. You focus on your emotional regulation. You might literally have to repeat a mantra to yourself, such as, don't shrink, don't puff up, just stand on your sacred ground. You are deliberately choosing not to cower in shame and not to aggressively attack the boss back.
Okay, so you've regulated your breathing. You haven't sent a fiery reply email.
Yeah.
Then you get inspired.
Getting inspired isn't about looking at a sunset. In this context, it means actively pulling in wisdom that grounds you in your values rather than your fear.
Like finding your center.
Right. It might mean recalling a quote about resilience, or remembering a time you successfully navigated criticism in the past, or reaching out to a trusted, boundaried friend who can remind you of your core worth. You are bringing outside light into the dark tunnel of the shame spiral.
You are consciously changing the channel in your brain from the I'm a failure broadcast to the I am capable of learning broadcast. And then finally, you get going.
Get going is the action phase. You take one small, grounded step to move through the vulnerability rather than numbing it. In the case of the email, getting going might mean writing down 3 objective questions to ask your boss tomorrow for clarification, and then closing the laptop and going for a walk.
Moving forward constructively.
You are taking action that aligns with wholeheartedness rather than paralysis.
Deliberate, inspired, going. It takes all of this theoretical, psychological headwork and forces it into practical, actionable heart work. So as we zoom out and look at the totality of this deep dive into the gifts of imperfection, we always have to answer the core book note question.
The big why.
Why does this specific book matter right now, and who is it really for?
This book is for anyone who is bone tired. It is for anyone who feels like they are constantly running on the treadmill of the hustle for worthiness. If you wake up every day feeling like your life is an exhausting performance, that you are always perfecting, always pleasing, always proving that you deserve to take up space, this book is the permission slip to step off that treadmill.
To just stop running.
It exposes the fundamental lie of perfectionism. The lie that if you just do everything flawlessly, you will finally be exempt from the pain of human existence and finally feel loved.
It matters because it shifts the entire paradigm of how we view our own value. It moves the needle from the external question of what will they think of me to the internal declaration of I am enough right now, exactly as I am, flaws and all. And as Dr. Brown points out so beautifully in her concluding thoughts, this text transcends the traditional boundaries of a self-help book.
It's much bigger than that.
She frames it as an invitation to a wholehearted revolution. It is a call for a grassroots movement of ordinary people deciding to stand up and say, my story matters because I matter. It's a collective, powerful rejection of the relentless societal pressure to always be cool, to always be in control, to monetize every hobby, and to never, ever show weakness.
It is a revolution of authenticity because we live in a culture that literally profits from your self-doubt. Entire industries are built on the premise that you are not quite enough yet.
They sell us the cure to the disease they gave us.
In that context, choosing to unconditionally love and accept yourself is a fiercely rebellious act. Yes, the risk of taking off the armor and letting people see the real, messy, imperfect you is terrifying. But it is nowhere near as dangerous or as tragic as the risk of slowly losing yourself by hiding behind a polished facade.
That is so powerful.
Oh, wow.
In a world profiting from our insecurity, self-love is an act of rebellion. This book truly holds up a mirror and changes the way you look at your own reflection. It asks you to have compassion for the person looking back at you.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day and interact with the people in your life. We have spent this time discussing how unused creativity curdles into resentment and how our attempts at selective numbing ultimately destroy our capacity for joy.
And the armor we wear.
We've talked about the immense weight of the armor we carry. So look at your daily routine tomorrow. Look closely at those specific micro moments where you feel a sudden spike of anxiety or insecurity. Where are you instinctively reaching for that 20-ton shield of perfectionism to hide behind? And what would happen if, just for one single day, you bravely chose to leave it on the floor?
What a beautiful, terrifying challenge. Thank you so much for joining us in the Book Nook today for this deep dive into the gifts of imperfection. If this conversation shifted something for you, if it made you want to put down the shield, make sure to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss a deep dive with us. We are building an incredible community of wholehearted learners here, and we want you to be a part of it. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.